Zach was talking about Phil, or wanted to talk about Philadelphia. So
I was gonna make a transition. So
okay, go ahead.
So yes, A Time to Kill. That after seeing a few clips and hearing you guys talk about it, I very much need to watch that. Also, I love all the people in it. Chris Cooper, who's very underrated as an actor.
Yeah, Chris Cooper, Sandra Bullock, and we haven't talked about Sandra Bullock's character. For me, it illustrates that when a person decides to take a stand, they have to accept the risk they take as well. And she does take the risk. And sometimes, it's not Pollyanna. It could be real life. So I like that. I really like that movie.
I do also you should really watch that movie, Zach.
But from a different, so in Philadelphia, that was another movie that you said you very much enjoyed. That is Denzel Washington's character representing a gay man, or at least he's a lawyer, but he has AIDS, Tom Hanks. So
yes,
that was set in 1990, at the time it was made.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by Jonathan Demme.
Yes.
Most known for directing an episode of Columbo, and Silence of the Lambs. But what is it about Philadelphia that you very much enjoy? Also,
Philadelphia, and I tell this story a lot, was the movie I did not want to see. I didn't want to see Philadelphia. I did not want to see Philadelphia. And I had to come to grips with my homophobia. I admit that freely now. But at the time, it was just like, I don't know if I want to see a movie about AIDS. And that has become another favorite of mine. I may watch Philadelphia once a year. And that's saying a lot about me, because the only movie I watch once a year routinely is The Godfather. For me, The Godfather is the greatest movie ever filmed. But let's stay focused.
I remember, yeah. I remember
Philadelphia.
That was up on here.
Now, is watching it in the night? I mean, AIDS was an 80s. I mean, it still happened, but that, like, when it really hit, that was the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s. So it's kind of
Philadelphia. Really, I think Philadelphia was released in 83, wasn't it?
Oh my!
It was 93.
93.
Yeah.
So 93. You're exactly right. Here's the thing about Philadelphia. Joe's character, Denzel's character, it's riveting to see him progress from where he starts the movie to where he ends the movie. And for me, it reflects the reality of the Black community around the issue of AIDS, around the issue of gay LGBT issues. The Black community, generally speaking, and historically speaking, has been a fairly conservative community. The church, the Black church, is huge. Issues of morality are huge. Family issues are huge, and this hits all the buttons, and you can see it portrayed in Denzel Washington's character. He meets Tom Hanks's character first. They're jovial, collegial. The next time he sees him, Tom Hanks is clearly ill, and when Joe, Denzel's character, meets him the second time, he actually recoils from him. And it's the scene in the library that really turns the screws on Denzel around justice, because he sees how Tom Hanks's character is treated as Tom is researching his case in the library. And he decides in that moment to join his team, and he still has to navigate his feelings, his upbringing, his biases throughout the entire film with his wife. When he finds out that one of her cousins is gay, that he did not know, and then somebody mistakes him in a convenience store for being gay. They're just so that performance is so rich. Now Tom, got all the accolades for that film. Didn't it win an award?
I believe that was his first Oscar.
Yeah.
For Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
I wonder
But
if
you watch
Denzel was nominated.
If you watch that movie over and again, you will see things that'll pop out at you, and you wonder, how did I miss that the first time? How did I miss that? When you think about how Denzel starts the movie, and then toward the end of the movie, he actually gives Tom Hanks oxygen to breathe. We had talked about proximity, and that's an ultimate example of how proximity can change your perspective and your life. I love that movie.
I wonder it. So the way I see Philadelphia, it kind of, well, I would say it is through the perspective of Denzel Washington, because you have Tom Hanks, but at a certain point, the Tom Hanks character becomes kind of you see Denzel Washington seeing Tom Hanks, like seeing what is happening to Tom Hanks. We still get glimpses, but the change, you have Tom Hanks's change physically, but you have Denzel Washington's psychological change. Because you're right.
Yes,
when I think of the beginning is he's kind of a, an advertisement lawyer. He's got the whole catchphrase of like, treat me like I'm a 5-year-old or whatever. Explain it to me like
he's a personal injury lawyer.
Mm.
He's a personal injury lawyer.
So he sees it as like a huge money, and then throughout the whole film you kind of see that.
Absolutely. I recommend that movie.
I was wondering when you were talking about how this is the kind of film that like depicts African Americans and how they don't really like LGBT, or it's more conservative. I was wondering, when do you think in like cinema history movies started depicting African Americans as more realistic? Like, do you remember a time in which like you started seeing more of a shift to, because I feel like around like the 60s, besides like a few here and there, it was a little bit more cartoonish. It was not really serious. When do you think you started seeing that switch?
1967, In the Heat of the Night. 1967, In the Heat of the Night, the slap scene. That changed movies forever. And if you remember the scene,
I do.
He's interrogating or questioning a local bigwig in this southern town. The guy feels insulted, slaps Sidney, and without hesitation, Sidney slaps him back. Now, he could have been arrested. He could have been shot. But the sheriff, who's standing right there, doesn't do a thing. And if you continue to watch that scene, there's a butler there. There's a butler there as they walk out, and he looks at Sidney's character, looks back at his boss, shakes his head, and turns around. Changed everything.
Wow.
Do you remember seeing that? Did you see that in theaters when it came out?
I did. Matter of fact, I saw it. I was in the military theater when I saw it.
What was
the response? There was an audible gasp in the theater.
That's movie experience right there.
Beautiful.
That's a movie experience. If you have never seen a film in a troop theater on an army base with troops that are going through basic training, it is an experience in itself. I don't even
Yeah.
know if you can have that movie going experience anymore. I saw The Graduate in a troop theater. It was great.
What
Speaking of
makes it?
the- oh,
Oh, I was just wondering what makes a military viewing experience. What is it? Kind of more just like this is the first time you get to kind of relax. Is that what makes it more?
And yeah, they've gone through a full day of training. They get to they get a pass to go to the movie, and it's experiential. They laugh out loud, they clap out loud, they cheer out loud, they gasp out loud. It was just it's what a movie going experience should be.
mhm.
Amen. I totally agree with that. The last movie I saw in theater, people were walking out, going like talking on their cell phone. Hey,
Yeah.
so
But
you're telling me
going back to what so you mentioned The Graduate. I have a book recommendation for you,
Oh.
Reed, because you said The Graduate and In the
it's
Heat
called.
of the Night.
I have it
There
right
you-
here.
That's it. It's called Pictures at a Revolution. It's about
Yeah.
the year. Oh, do you know this? Have you heard of this book?
No, I haven't heard of this book.
Okay, it's about the year 1967 and the movies that were all going to the Oscars at the time.
So I got it right
In
here.
the Heat of the Night. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the whole book title is called Pictures at a Revolution: 5 Movies and the Birth of a New Hollywood. That's Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, In the Heat of the Night, and of course, Dr. Dolittle. And those are some of those movies are some of the most transformational movies in
Oh,
cinema.
they are, and I
Yeah.
think I saw them all except Dr. Doolittle. But if you
Yeah,
remember,
just-
but if you remember, the Academy Awards in 1968 were delayed because that was around the time that ML Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Mhm.
And if you go back and you watch some film clips from that, there were some speeches from the dais that were just absolutely phenomenal.
Mhm. They do talk about it a little bit, and well, they talk about it the whole like it kind of like the culmination is the Oscars.
Yeah.
But I think that's a book recommendation. It was a really I finished it kind of recently. But going back to our topic, In the Heat of the Night, I rewatched it. I remember I watched it when I was I don't know, in middle school or something. And then I rewatched it again as an adult, and it really hit me more so how honest it was for the 60s. Like I remember it was like, this is from the 60s. It felt so raw in a way that I
Yeah.
feel like most 60s films they're either people of color are just either not featured, or they're featured as like comedic features or
Yes,
comedic characters, or the racism is just kind of like lightly sprinkled on. And this was like
Yes.
hard, like even more so than a lot of films today. It's a really great movie, but also
It's pretty hardcore.
tying that into another recommendation that you sent, is the one that we actually we haven't watched yet, but the same director who directed In the Heat of the Night is the same director who did A Soldier Story. Do you want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about that movie?
Oh man, did you know that A Soldier Story that I think it was Columbia, kept rejecting it, and they finally decided to actually produce the film when the director said he wouldn't be paid, and they cast
Wow.
they cast the actors they cast were not film actors. They were all that came from the Broadway play.
How about that?
Adolf Caesar, who played the Sarge, was had that had that same role on Broadway. Denzel Washington, I think that might have been his second movie.
Wow.
He
Holy
wasn't even
cow.
a star yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
this came out
checking.
84. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
fairly early
yeah.
on.
So I think it was Denzel's second movie. Um, his second really feature movie. That story, that film resonated with me, mostly because of my military background. I could really get to the setting, the military post, the uniforms, and to me, it was a representation of when my father was in the military. Because he was in a segregated military. He was in the military before they integrated the armed forces. So yeah, they got a murder on an army base in the South. They send an investigator who happens to be a black officer, and there were very few black officers in the army at the time. Um, and he goes through the process of investigating and interviewing not only the black troops, because it's a black unit on this installation led by white officers, but he also interrogates and questions white officers, and with a trick ending, with a really trick ending. Denzel puts in a fabulous performance as what was it? Private. What was his name?
Private First Class Peterson.
There you go, Private
Peterson.
First Class Peterson. That movie explored a lot of different things. Yeah, racism, segregation, issues of class, because there was tension between, the white officers and enlisted men, and also the issue that is very seldom discussed, self-hate.
Mm.
In the race. And the famous line is, "They still hate you," continues to resonate in my head.
Hmm.
Adolf Caesar really portrayed an excellent part in that movie. You start to you hate him until toward the end of the movie you start to empathize with him in a strange sort of way.
Sergeant Waters. Funny. We actually our mom apparently tried out for that movie because it was filming in Arkansas. She
Really?
went down. Yeah, she went down to audition to be in the movie. And she didn't realize that they were mostly looking for actors. She knew nothing about the story. So she went to audition, and they kind of just you're white. We can't. It was
Yeah,
kind of
white.
funny. I think she said it was.
Or like a white woman. It was the exact opposite of the cast.
Yeah. She said it was the first thing she ever, or did she say it was like one of the first things she ever auditioned for because she was in high school when it happened.
Wow.
But yeah, you should talk to her about that. But
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Unless
No, go ahead.
we've been talking about movies, and I don't know how much time we have left, but ever since HBO or Cinemax, TV has become, in my mind, a beautiful place for like cinematic stories. Are there any like TV shows that really stuck with you about like the race and diversity that you've seen recently or huge fan of?
Oh, TV shows. Oh man. The Good Wife, The Good Fight,
Hmm.
are two. Um, you know, um, everybody's going to mention the Cosby Show and how ground breaking that was, but that was groundbreaking for a different reason. Um, TV shows. Wow.
Now,
Wow.
have you by any chance seen the show? It's a recent show, Watchmen, the new HBO reincarnation of that.
I believe I saw the first season.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Because
you saw the whole first season.
I think I did. I know I was watching the first season, but then I came off of DirecTV and started streaming and kind of lost HBO for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But that, for me, if I was going to pick a show with black themes, I probably wouldn't pick that. Only because I really had to make the transition into what Watchmen was about, and it was recommended to me by a colleague of mine who was really into it.
Mm-hmm.
So, right now I can't really think of one. I'm sure one will come to mind. But I know the last movie on my list was Fences, and that was filmed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, filmed in Pittsburgh, and August Wilson is buried in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
August Wilson's from Pittsburgh, and that's Denzel Washington again. Denzel, there's a recurring theme in my recommendations.
I was probably going to bring this up eventually, but yeah, the other movies you have are Glory, great movie, the single tier, and Malcolm X, which is that's an epic movie. I gotta say, that's
Spike Lee's best movie.
I was gonna say, I mean, I do enjoy the Do the Right Things and Do the Right Thing and 25th Hour, but I would say Malcolm X is like his Ben-Hur in the sense of in its scale, in its scope, and the characters.
What about
So
yeah, go ahead, Reed.
So let me ask you a question. You saw Malcolm X. Did your opinion of Malcolm X change from the time you walked in to the time that you ended that movie?
It only changed in the sense that I now understood where he was coming from. I think I was not really, I didn't know too much about him. I knew about that he was an activist, but he was maybe a little bit more more aggressive with he had a different philosophy of Martin Luther King Jr. So this movie, to me, I understood it more, where he was coming from.
They sort of started off Malcolm X and Martin Luther King as polar opposites, and by the time that Malcolm was assassinated, they kind of met in the middle.
Right, because
if you think about it,
it at the end in the life, he was he, and it, please, if I may be wrong about this, but Malcolm X was kind of like was he starting to not push that kind of like, let's not.
It was more like peaceful.
Peaceful, he was never not.
Yeah, he was never violent. His rhetoric was toned down. He toned his rhetoric down. He realized that he had assimilated a form of
like a
group,
what do
I want to use?
Or
a form of the Muslim religion that was extreme.
Right,
and
because
it took his visit to Mecca to understand the folly of his ways, and he was changing. Probably one of the things that got him killed.
Now, you said that in your opinion is Spike Lee's best film. Why, comparing, I guess, naturally to Do the Right Thing, why would you say you prefer Malcolm X more so than Do the Right Thing?
Because of the impact it had on people. Again, it was a movie that I wasn't sure that I wanted to see in Georgia. And I saw people leaving the theater that evening in tears.
Right.
White people.
Okay.
And anything that has a profound effect on individuals for the positive, I tend to elevate. I don't know if it's his best film, but it's certainly one of his best. You know,
Yeah.
from every aspect, cinematography, from pacing, the level of the acting. You know, Angela Bassett and the actors that were in that film, I think did an excellent job. And that is another one that requires multiple viewings.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely. I
Definitely.
actually read the book before I watched the movie.
Mhm.
It was actually I read the book probably way too young. I read it when I was in 5th grade, and I didn't really know who Malcolm X was until I read the autobiography.
Yeah.
So I always thought of him as just this very complicated man. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm more like our mom always liked us to read books before we like watched a movie if it was like kind of violent. So that's part of
I
the reason why
agree.
I did it. So it was kind
I
of cool,
agree.
like just seeing the parallels between the books and how much he really did capture his autobiography. But before because I think we only have about like 5 minutes left. I want to talk about the movie, the most recent of the movies that you recommend. You said it's 12 Years a Slave, which
Yes.
came out in 2012.
Yes.
Why? What about that movie? I mean, it's fairly obvious, but from your perspective, what about that movie?
That's a tough movie. I've only seen the movie once, but I have that movie in my collection.
Hmm.
One day, and it may be soon, I'm going to pull it back out and watch it again. I'll be emotional at that movie, at the betrayal of an injustice to a human being who was stolen, who was kidnapped and placed in the slavery, and I just can't imagine what that could be like. I almost did not put that on my list, you know, for the same reasons around the white savior. But I did because I look at the role that some of the white actors played, and I tried to place myself in their shoes in terms of the time. A lot of times people say, well, why didn't they just leave? Well, they couldn't leave. Or why didn't more people help? Well, they were killing people that helped. It was a brutal time. And I don't think that any of us, understand the nature of that sort of brutality.
It seems
Put
like it's
upon
unthinkable, but
it
I,
is unthinkable.
I
It's
watched
unthinkable.
the movie 13th by Ava DuVernay about the it's a documentary about the prison system, and it
I almost put
ends
that on there.
well, why didn't you?
Well, because it's a documentary.
Okay. Fair.
That's right.
Well, we're probably running out of time, but I thought it was interesting how it ended because it has to do kind of with what you were talking about. How people always say how like they don't know how people could have lived back then. Like, why didn't people do anything? But there's injustices happening every day now that in the future, people might be saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
13th is a great recommendation. I think anybody that has not seen 13th owes it to themselves to see it.
It's on
Ava did
Netflix.
a fantastic. It is, and it's an unflinching look at and ties it to our current time.
Yeah.
I still
Also,
think that we live in a time. Also,
oh, I was just gonna say it's also on YouTube.
I think we live in.
But yeah, go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, I think we live at a time that we'll look back in history and we'll say that was a time. If things don't change, we'll say that was a time we should have changed. But if things do begin to change, will mark that time as a turning point. It feels so much like how I felt the morning of 9/11, when I knew in the moment that our world and our lives had changed. Even then, I remember remarking that I don't know what it's going to look like in the future, but it's not going to look like what it looks like now.
Hmm.
And it doesn't. It doesn't.
But before we wrap up, do you feel optimistic, or do you feel pessimistic, or do you feel somewhere in the middle about?
I feel cautiously optimistic because I know what sort of energy and work it's going to take to start the process of building equity in our society. There's no way we should continue. We should be acting this way with each other. There's just so much that is so wrong that we need a course correction, and really face the ills of our society and do something about them. We've got to decide to do it. We can do whatever we want to. I mean, Elon Musk just put people on the International Space Station. The guy that was building electric cars. Come on. we could do this.
Mm-hmm. It's a good example.
Very powerful. Sorry we couldn't get to all of your movies.
That's okay. That's okay.
There is obviously so much more we could have gotten into, but I think we definitely did a little bit more than skim the surface. I think we went a little bit deeper. So thank you so much, Reed, for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope I made some sense along the way.
Oh, you made perfect sense. Yeah, thank you so much. And you're always welcome back on if you ever want to talk about movies or just want to chat.
It's all right. You know where to get me.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
You know how to reach me.
All right.
All right. Do a live show.
My best to you. My best to you folks.
My best to you. All right. Bye, Reed.
Goodbye, Reed. Goodbye, folks at home, too. Stay clean, Spider-Man. That's our call. Right. And that's...
Bye.